What are some good examples of invitations? What are some examples of invitations outside of church? What are some examples of invitations? What would you invite somebody to? A wedding invitation. Sometimes you get a wedding invitation in the mail. Okay? Graduation. You're invited to come attend a graduation, to see the accomplishment of someone who's graduating from something. Kindergarten, high school, college, graduation invitation. What else?
Baby showers.
Baby shower invitations. We had a bunch of those this past year, haven't we? A lot of baby showers going on. All right. Sometimes you get an invitation to that. Birthdays. All right. Come to the birthday party. All right. Just a dinner invitation. Hey, come. You want to have some dinner? You want to get a cup of coffee? There's an invitation. Yeah.
Maybe a conference or webinar, business.
Okay. Sometimes we get business invitations to attend certain continuing education opportunities. Business invitations. Good. You could invite somebody to church. Yes. Okay. If you're married, I'm assuming that at some point, the person that you married, one or the other, invited you to go out on a date, right? And then invited you eventually to get married, right? That's an invitation. Do you want to do life together? Those are invitations. So lots of invitations. Super Bowl parties, anniversary celebrations, retirement parties, job fair invite, of course, church invites. How much thought's put into some of these invitations? A lot? Okay. Months? I mean, all right. If you're talking about a wedding, some people plan out that wedding for a long time, and they figure out who they can invite, who they can afford to invite, who makes the cut list, who makes the invite list. That's one of the first points of conflict sometimes you start to have in your relationship, that we got 120 of your people coming and only 50 of mine. Can we balance that out a little bit? Working through that. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of preparation. Wedding invitations are expensive too. It takes a lot of money sending all those out sometimes. All right. Preparation. If you ask somebody out on a date, you probably should think through it just a little bit, how you want to do that. There's probably a right way to do that, and there could be a wrong way to do that. And so we think through it a little bit. How do I want to go about offering this invitation? Do you know anybody who's really good at inviting people to do stuff? I feel like they're kind of skilled. They really make you want to come.
Well, he is not here anymore, but Tom Stanfield, that was his superpower.
His superpower. I like it. Tommy Stanfield was a good inviter. Yeah.
It's really impressive to me because I'm not good at it myself. But people just all of a sudden just out of the blue come up to you and say, I'm having a few people over for lunch. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, it's not that they put any thought into it because they do it enough, but it's easy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think sometimes there's a right way and a wrong way to do it? I mean, if you said to Susan there, hey, I'm having some people over. I'd love to have you come too. That's probably a good way to do it. If you say, hey, I invited like 50 people over, 49 of them have said no. You're the last one on my list.
Going down the list.
This probably doesn't really make you feel very welcome. Well, thanks for thinking of me at the very end there. I appreciate that. There could be a way that hurts your feelings and a right way and a wrong way. And I think it can be the same way when we offer invitations to study the Word of God, to even come to church with us. There can be a better way to do it. And we just want to think about that a little bit tonight. Russell, you had a hand up.
The Hamiltons are very good inviters.
Hamiltons are very good inviters. It's hard to say no to Brian. Yeah, he works you over good.
They have a lot of things to invite us to as well.
Okay, yeah, well, good.
What about a funeral?
Did you say a funeral? Well,
Everybody would be in the mood already, that mindset of studying, look at the Bible,
Okay, so a funeral might be a good opportunity to invite someone to learn more about the Lord. Is that what you're connecting? I think that's a great point. I make that point a lot as a preacher, that I've had a lot of conversions come out of funerals. Just opportunities to talk to people about the gospel at a funeral when you're really thinking about things that matter right then and there. So I think you're dead right, no pun intended, on that. All right, so take a look at this. And I thought this Lifeway research here was kind of interesting. This is from just a few years ago, but I think it's also in your book. But they asked the question, what form of publicity is the most successful at attracting new members? And I know as a church sometimes we really focus on social media and making sure we're posting about what we're doing, but at the time this research was done, 6% of people came because of a social media post. Internet communication, which might just be emailing somebody or something like that, 4%. 3% of people came because or became new members. So we're talking about people, we're not talking about a gospel meeting where we invite other churches and other people. We're talking about people who were unchurched and came to church and then became followers of Jesus. That's the type of research they're doing. And 3% of those people came because a mailer got sent out and they responded to the mailer. 3% of people came because they saw a billboard or a road sign. So I would never say don't do any of those things. Newspaper, 1%, newspaper or print ads. Not a lot of people read newspaper a whole lot anymore. Door hangers and flyers. Maybe you went around, hung a door hanger. We did that. We've done that a few times at places where I've preached, where we had some door hangers printed, and we just went to the houses. We didn't even knock on the door. We just hung it on the door and left so that they could know that they were invited. But 77% of new members at churches come from just word of mouth. You, with your mouth, in a personal relationship with someone, inviting them to come study about Jesus and come to church. That, far and away, blows out any other means of trying to get people to come hear the gospel and to learn about it. And so that's what we want to focus on as we look at our lesson here today. Is it really hard to find people who are spiritually lost or people who are in spiritual error? Is that really hard? It's not hard. It's everywhere. You're probably around people every day, unless you're like me and you work alone in an office around no one. I probably have the least advantage of anyone here in terms of contacts because there's nobody in this building with me. And so I work alone a lot of times. You can try to make some opportunities, go out and, go to somebody's ball game and hopefully meet somebody and, get out in the real world and meet some people. But if you're working shoulder to shoulder with people, if you're out in the real world, you're going all kinds of community groups and things like that, you're around people who are lost. And I think it's important for us to think through a little bit about what can I say, how can I say it, to try to help them change this situation when the opportunity arises. Now, in John 1, 35 through 42, let's read through some things here. John 1, 35 through 42. John 1:35 says this. It says, "Again the next day, John stood with 2 of his disciples. And looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, 'Behold, the Lamb of God.' The 2 disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. And then Jesus turned, and seeing them following, said to them, 'What do you seek?' They said to him, 'Rabbi,' which is to say, when translated, 'Teacher,' 'where are you staying?' He said to them, 'Come and see.' And they came, and they saw where he was staying, and remained with him that day. Now it was about the 10th hour. And one of the 2 who heard John speak and followed him, followed Jesus, was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. And he first found his own brother Simon and said to him, 'We have found the Messiah,' which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And now when Jesus looked at him, he said, 'You are Simon, the son of Jonah. you shall be called Cephas, which is translated a stone. All right, who invites who? When you look at John chapter 1 here, there's a couple of invitations going on, actually.
Jesus invites the disciples with John.
Okay, there were some disciples with John, and John had pointed out, this is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, and Jesus kind of takes over from there. And John says, what do you seek? And they want to know more about him as a teacher and what his teaching was about. And so he invites them to come where he's staying. And I love that. Jesus just invites somebody over to his house. Come over to my place and I'll teach you some things. And they do that. So Jesus offers an invitation to these first two. And then who's next? One of those two is Andrew, and Andrew goes and finds who? Who's first on his list after he learns about Jesus? Simon Peter, his brother. Their relationship then is family. So what does he say to him? Is it a real complex argument? Does he write him like a 3-page letter? What does he say?
He said the Messiah was here.
We found the Messiah. Hey, you need to come learn. We found the Messiah. That's it. And perhaps Peter is waiting for the Messiah. You can say as a Jew, he's anticipating this. He's been hoping that this day might come. Perhaps this is something they talked about together as brothers on their boat. And so there seems to be some knowledge of who the Messiah is. But the invitation is not complex. It's not complicated. It's just, hey, we found the Messiah, which is the Christ. We found the Anointed One. Don't you want to learn about him? And he comes. I would imagine. I don't know how to act it out. I'll try. but perhaps, yeah. I think you're probably right. This is an exciting moment. So, how would you describe Peter's impact on the early church? Pretty big, right? Pretty significant. He preaches the first sermon in Acts 2, preaches the first sermon to the Gentiles in Acts 10. He's opening the door, writes 2 letters, 1st and 2nd Peter. Mark was probably a disciple of Peter, so Mark's gospel probably stems a lot from Peter's. I mean, Peter has a huge influence on the church. And if this invitation is not extended by his brother, perhaps Peter never becomes a disciple of Jesus. And we never have 1st and 2nd Peter, and we never have Acts 2, and we never have Acts 10. So Andrew invites his brother, and the rest, I guess we could say, is history. When we invite people to church, then maybe something we could just simply ask when we're trying to get people to really focus on the key point is something like this. If God did send his son to earth, wouldn't it be worth an hour of your time to learn more about him? Maybe that could be a simple thing that we ask. Just kind of memorize that line. If God did send his son to earth, would it be worth an hour of your time to come learn about him with me? And not necessarily does it have to be a church. It could be in my living room. It can be at a coffee shop. It can be at the park, at a hospital, sure. I mean, we have a very captive audience at certain places like that. But invitations don't have to be really complex and difficult. And if you don't feel comfortable maybe sharing the gospel with them, then I'm sure if you made a phone call or two, you could certainly find people from here who would be glad to have that hour conversation with this person who's interested. What I want to emphasize is the invitation, but I also want to emphasize, have you reached out to your family to try to share the gospel with them? That was first on Andrew's list, his brother. And I remember there's a preacher, he died several years ago, Ed Dye. He was in Arkansas for a long time. And Ed converted from being a Baptist to converted to the Lord's church. And fantastic preacher, one of the best Bible students, one of the best minds. I've got a ton of his outlines that I still read from, and they're so complex and so detailed, and I can't even preach them because we'd be here like 2 hours long because his sermons are awesome stuff. But I remember I was preaching a meeting when I was like 19 or 20 down in Arkansas, and Ed was preaching a meeting 15 minutes from where I was preaching a meeting right down the road. And I called him up. I said, Ed, I'd like to talk to you about preaching. I'm thinking about preaching. I was in college at that time. I wasn't full-time preaching yet. And so we had lunch. I said, tell me about your conversion story. Tell me about everything that, why'd you become a Christian? And he just kind of went through. Somebody talked to him one day about, here's what you believe. Here's what the Bible teaches. And he said, I could not deny the truth. So I became a Christian. And I remember him telling me, he said, in the very first thing I did, I didn't start preaching. I went and I talked to every single family member I had about the gospel to try to share that truth with them too, because I wanted my family to be saved. And he converted some of his family through teaching them as well. But I've always remembered that and thought, this reminds me so much of what Andrew does here. I just found a Messiah. I want you to learn about him. And Peter does. And so have you reached out to your family? We sometimes make it too complicated too about who the prospects are. You may have people in your own family that you need to have serious conversations with about spiritual things. Maybe that's something we can do. Sometimes we make things too complicated. So I guess my next question or encouragement to you would be this. Who are some of the people in your own family that you can talk to about the gospel? And you can talk to about the truth? And maybe even write down a list of family prospects. I started doing insurance probably, 2015, 2016. And when I first started doing it, I was working with a little agency. I needed to make some extra income to support my family at that point in time. And so I started doing some insurance there, working for a little agency. And when I started working with this agency, I remember one of the first things they did, which I hate. It's write down a list of 25 family or friends that you can reach out to who need insurance. Because guess what? Everybody needs it, right? You need homeowners insurance, you need car insurance. So you write down a list of 25 people, and here's how you get started. You reach out to those people. And when you save them some money and they talk to somebody else about it, that's just how it grows. It just grows from there. So just do that. Now, I don't like doing that because I really, for me, I don't like people to see me as a salesman, and then people run away from you at the family reunions like, oh boy, he's going to hit me up for insurance. I'm leaving. So I don't love that aspect, but when we're talking about the gospel, we're talking about people's souls here. So we're talking about something that's much more important that we should be much more serious about. And I think it's worth our time writing down a list of a few names when you get a little bit of time and thinking, that's somebody that I need to talk to. That I need to, maybe it's a letter you're more comfortable with, maybe it's a phone conversation, maybe it's just sitting down over coffee. But are there people that you have in your mind, family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, that you can just kind of work through that list for the next month? And that's how the church grows, is through us reaching other people with the gospel. That's how it grew from the start. In John 1, you've got another one here, 43 through 51. Philip invites Nathanael. So let's keep reading through here in John 1. Verse 43 says, the following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, come and see. And Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, how do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said to him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? you'll see greater things than these. We'll stop there, verse 50. But what was the likely relationship of these two men? In John 21, what are they all doing together? They're all fishing. And it seems like the 7 people who are there in John chapter 21 are probably some of the people who are the fishermen among the apostolic band. And so I think we could make a pretty good assumption that we're talking about people who were fishermen together. And so they were co-workers then. Co-workers. Do you ever have downtime when you're at work? If you are at work and you work with other people, you ever have downtime where you have time to have conversations? I'm sure that a lot of you do. If you're still working in the workplace, you have a little lunch break, or you take a little coffee break, or you have moments where it's just dead, nothing's going on, and so you got a few minutes to talk. At some point, have you ever turned the conversation away from who's playing in the Super Bowl this year, or the weather that's coming in this weekend, or all the small talk that we do all the time, and actually turned it to something that really matters and talked about something serious? And you don't have to be mean or rude or insulting about it, but just offer a kind of an open question, open invitation to talk about spiritual things. And I think that's what we see going on with Philip and Nathaniel. We overcomplicate it. Again, we look at all the words and what this Greek word. What's going on here simply are two guys that work together that have talked about spiritual stuff before probably, and now Philip's like, Nathaniel, remember how we were talking about the Messiah? He's here. We found him. You should meet him. And Nathaniel is skeptical at first, right? I mean, what would you say to your coworker if they said something like that to you? Maybe you would be a little skeptical. And so Nathaniel says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And so what is the response of Philip to that? Come and see. Just check it out. Give it a shot. So just give it a chance. So we are going to get met sometimes with skeptical responses, almost kind of a scoffing with some people. But that didn't stop Philip, and I don't think that should stop us as well. Maybe we can take it a step further and say, just give it a chance. Or maybe, since we live in this world of where we have sermons on YouTube and things like that, we can say, hey, I'm going to send you a link. Do you have 30 minutes when you're driving somewhere to just listen to the sermon and tell me what you think? And let's talk about it. Those are just simple ways that we can evangelize and share truth with our neighbors and our coworkers. Or maybe just, hey, come before you judge. You know how many people are so judgmental about the church? They act like the church is judgmental, but there are people who are very judgmental about the church and about Christians. And that's essentially what I feel like Nathaniel's kind of given off. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Just very skeptical. Why don't you come and see before you judge? Just experience it for yourself, and maybe your mind will be changed. Maybe these Christian people aren't all that bad, like you might think. So don't get discouraged at negativity, I think is one of the things we learn from this. Keep the invitation simple. Be persistent, kindly persistent, and encourage people, just give Jesus a chance. Just give the church a chance. And I feel like that's what Philip does. It's simple. All right. Any more thoughts on that?
Things come up that we could, in that work situation where you're around the table with others, could bring up something. Boy, I learned something the other night in Bible class. I taught a class on the challenge of being a wife several times, and one of the women, we'd have it on Monday nights. Every Tuesday, they were all around the table. Okay, what was the challenge this time? What is it? Each week there was a challenge on, such as, say something nice about your husband personally every day. Not his clothes, not other things, but about him. And or ask 5 men what femininity is to them. They got so into the class, they were like every week they wanted to know what the class was about. And that's a good way to get people thinking about spiritual.
I think that's good advice. I think on Mondays, when you get back around the people that you're around on Monday, and you do have some of that downtime, I think it's a great way to kind of open a door. Hey, what'd you do this weekend? Usually people are going to ask you that same question. What'd you do this weekend? I went to church yesterday, and let me tell you something I learned. What do you think about that? I heard this good class. I heard this good point in this sermon. I mean, even if the whole sermon was bad, hopefully you learned one thing that you can talk about. What do you think about that? And you're going to get to know these people. They're going to share with you things in their lives that are going on, and it's also opportunities to say, I'll tell you what, I remember our preacher talked about this one time. We had a Bible class on this one time. We had a ladies class on this one time, and it really helped me with that particular situation. You want to study that sometime. Look for opportunities to ask questions like that. Those create open doors. And I think those are things we can take from Philip in our work. All right, question 7. Question 7. Now, we're in John 4 now. Keep working through John. And we don't have time to read this whole chapter, but what's going on in John chapter 4? Just summarize for us what's happening in this chapter. Jesus speaks with a woman at the well. What was this woman like? She was a Samaritan woman, strike 2. You said woman, that's strike 1. Samaritan, strike 2. What else was she like? Multiple marriages. For a lot of people, that'd be strike 3. Okay? There's a lot of guys. I don't want to talk to a woman. People might think something's up. I don't want to talk to a Samaritan woman. She looks different than me. And our Jewish people don't really like Samaritans. And I don't want to talk to a Samaritan woman who's also had 5 relationships that have failed because she doesn't have a good reputation. A lot of people would completely ignore this person. Jesus sets an example here, and he does not ignore the person who's a woman, who's a Samaritan, and who has had some messed up marriages. He talks to her. That right there is breaking barriers. Just the fact that he had a conversation with her. All right. What are his disciples doing while he's having this conversation out here by this well? Looking for food. So, yeah. All right. So you look through these verses. Verse 8, his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Verse 27, at this point, his disciples came. So they've been gone this whole time. Jesus just having this conversation with this woman. And they marveled that he talked with a woman. That's why I said strike 1. Like, what is Jesus talking to a woman for? They marveled that he talked with a woman, yet no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? Nobody questioned him out loud. But in their mind, they're thinking, what is going on here? Then verse 31, in the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. They were going looking for food. They know he's been having this conversation with this woman out in the heat. They've been walking for a while. He's tired. He's probably thirsty, hungry. You need to eat. He's not thinking about that. Verse 33, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? They just can't get their mind off food. And I think this is very indicative of our daily mentality. Daily mentality is we're just thinking about so many times the business of daily living. Going to the grocery, getting food, making food, sitting and eating food, going to work, driving home, going to the kids' practice, all that stuff. And we're not thinking about the spiritual opportunities that are all around us while we're going through the motions of our day. Jesus is not focused on food and not on all those things. Verse 10, Jesus is focused on this woman who he wants to open a door for to share with her the gift of God. And he says to her in verse 10, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. So he's trying to turn her mind from the physical water that she's pulling up out of the well to think about this living water. And of course, she gives him I think she smarts off to him a little bit too. Sir, you don't even have anything to draw water with, and you're crazy. Where's this living water going to come from? And verses 13 and 14, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks the water that I shall give him will never thirst. And I feel like she's almost mockingly playing along in verse 15. Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst nor come here to draw. I'm really tired of having to walk out from the village out to this well, bring my water back home. I'd love to have some of this water. And then it gets real serious when he says, go call your husband and come here. I don't know if that's probably the right way to handle a conversation. That might get you slapped in our world. But she says, I don't have a husband. And then he says, you say you don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands. Whoa, how did you know that? Now it gets spooky. Maybe there is something special about Jesus. Now, we don't have miraculous ability to do things like that, like he did, to know about a person's history without actually really knowing the person. But what I want you to see is that Jesus is not thinking about, physical food, the physical water. In fact, you look at verse 32, he says, I have food to eat of which you do not know. My food, verse 34, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. I want to get people to think about spiritual things, and that's what he wants more than anything with this woman. Yet for us, sometimes our daily life is focused on physical, material, worldly things, and we don't realize we're missing out on opportunities while we're doing those physical things to perhaps open doors to spiritual things with the people we're around. If we're going to think like Jesus, we have to start thinking like that. And maybe at the risk of even being seen as weird. I remember somebody saying to a guy that was working for him, what do you do? He said, I'm a carpenter. And he said, my father's a carpenter. And he was talking about Jesus, my Father in heaven is Jesus. I serve a carpenter. And it seemed kind of weird, but it opened the door for him to actually have a conversation about Jesus with this guy who was a carpenter. And this guy actually becomes a Christian because he was willing to say something that came off as weird at first, and it sparked a conversation about Jesus. If Jesus had the conversation he's having with this woman, we would probably think this is a little strange. But he has a point, and he's going to get to that point. He wants to get to that point with this person to talk to her about things that are more important than the physical water you're drinking and the physical food that you're eating, spiritual food, spiritual life. So here's the awesome thing about the Samaritan woman. Who does the Samaritan woman begin to invite once she is convinced Jesus is the Messiah? Whole community from her city. So you read John 4, 25 through 30. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all things. And Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. And at this point, his disciples came. They marveled that he talked with a woman. Verse 28, then the woman left her water pot, went her way into the city, said to the men, come see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And then they went out of the city and came to him. Now, how would you describe her attitude as she talked of Jesus in verse 29?
Excited.
Excited? Yeah. Maybe a little curious, like, I think I might have met somebody really important, I'm not sure. You can come check them out. Very open. And this woman doesn't know hardly anything about Jesus, but she's able to impact a huge group of people from her village. And I think that's important. Just being excited about spiritual things and talking about Jesus and being zealous and curious and open, it can lead to impacting other people. All right. The whole point of Jesus here is open your fields, open your eyes, the fields are wide. Other people need to hear the gospel too. But I want to finish up with this final point, and that is this. If you're passionate about Jesus, share him with others. Whether that be your family, like Andrew, whether it be your coworkers, like Philip, or whether it be your community to meet Jesus. The 3 things I want you to see from these 3 examples are, who are your prospects? Your family, your coworkers, and your community. And the invitation doesn't have to be that complicated. But we need to be eager, excited, energetic as we try to share Jesus with other people. All right, I'm out of time. I was out of time like 2 minutes ago.